She stood on the edge, heart pounding, eyes wide, ready to defy gravity. But what should have been her first jump turned into her final breath. From misheard commands to unfastened cords, these jumps weren't accidents. They were catastrophes. As always, viewer discretion is advised. In August 2015, Vera signed up for a Belgian tour company's adventure trip in northern Spain. Cantabria is a thrill-seeker's paradise full of caves, canyons, and wild rivers. But for Vera, she was drawn to one challenge: the bungee jump. For 5 years, the tour company had run these adventure camps, and each time, it was packed with glowing reviews. Vera never for a second doubted she would be safe. On August 10th, after a full day of activities, Vera and her new friends met the bungee instructors at the bridge. The evening air was cooling, but the excitement was building. Most of the group were beginners with no bungee jump experience. Teenagers like Vera and different ages too. Vera was pumped. It was also her first time, and she couldn't stop thinking about it the whole trip. Vera and 13 other teenagers hiked along a dirt track beside a dried riverbed until they arrived at their jump spot, a platform that was actually under a bridge on the main highway. One by one, the teens and their 5 leaders used ropes to climb up under the bridge. They sat on the support arches, legs dangling beneath them as the guides started to set up the jump. And so, with cars and trucks rushing overhead, the teenagers looked over the edge at the 105-foot drop to the bottom. How would you feel at this point? Afraid? Excited? Probably a mixture of both. Vera's nerves fluttered as the bungee instructors explained how the jump would work, but she trusted her leaders and her instructors. Vera watched as her friends all got attached to the bridge, bungees wrapped around their ankles. She cheered as they bravely leapt off before bouncing back up in the air, which probably calmed her nerves down. And before she knew it, it was her time to jump. She was the last one waiting at the top of the platform. One of the guides, a young Spanish man, buckled Vera in her harness. He tightened each strap and checked each clip. Once everything was ready, he hooked the bungee cord onto her body. But here's where everything fell apart. The young guide looked Vera in the face and said, "No jump. It's important. No jump." And so everyone was shocked when Vera walked over to the edge and jumped off. Vera flew off the bridge and sped toward the ground, waiting for the bounce that would save her. But the bungee wasn't attached to the bridge. There was no bounce at all. Vera's laugh turned to a scream in that final second, as she realized that there was no escape. Without anything to catch her fall, Vera dropped to the dry riverbed below. Even though she was wearing a helmet, Vera's speed was too high. She died as soon as she hit the ground. The tour guides called the medics, but it was too late. There was nothing they could do. Have you worked out what happened yet? Because it took the courts 2 years to finally figure out what went wrong that night. The main problem was that the bungee instructor's English was very poor, and his Spanish accent was very thick. When he said "no jump," Vera thought he said "now jump." So, that's what she did. For 2 non-English speakers to understand each other, some things are going to be lost in translation. But for Vera, those 2 words cost her her life. But that wasn't the only mistake that day. Vera was just 17 when she jumped. The rules prohibited instructors from allowing under 18-year-olds to jump, but they didn't follow that. Nobody on the platform that day checked her ID or asked if she had her parents' permission. Also, it's illegal to jump from a road bridge in Spain, and the tour group had no permits. In the end, the Spanish instructors were arrested and investigated for criminal actions. It was tragic that a simple phrase was enough to send Vera to her death. This was similar to what happened with Yecenia Morales Gomez in July 2021. Yecenia stood on the bridge with her boyfriend, a viaduct in northern Colombia. The 25-year-old lawyer was ready for an adventure, which is why she and her partner drove an hour from her home in Medellin to make the leap. Even though bungee jumping in Colombia was pretty new at that time, Yecenia was keen to try it out. Sky Bungee Jumping Amaga had supervised over 4,000 people jumping from the local bridge. Tons of people raved about their experience. It was an unforgettable time. One moment, you're falling headfirst off the bridge. The next, the bungee cord attached to your ankles snaps back and saves you from water 164 feet below. I've heard that bungee jumping is one of the safest extreme sports to try, with only one death for every 500,000 jumps, which sounds statistically safe. Yecenia and her boyfriend joined 90 other jumpers that day. Everyone was ready to leap off the bridge. I'm sure a few of them had second thoughts once they looked at how far down the bottom really was. Maybe Yecenia did too. Only a few people had already tried bungee jumping before, but most were new to the sport. In other words, most of the jumpers were as nervous as Yecenia felt, but as soon as they saw other people having the time of their lives, they psyched themselves up to go. On the bridge, Yecenia's boyfriend put on his safety harness and got clipped into the bungee. Yecenia's stomach must have had 1,000,000 butterflies in it as she got ready to go next. Only a few minutes left. But somewhere in the excitement, Yecenia got confused. The instructor looked at her boyfriend and said, "Jump now." But Yecenia thought he was talking to her. And before anyone could stop her, Yecenia leapt off into space and fell from the bridge. But there was no bungee attached to her. She dropped like a stone and hit the ground at the bottom of the ravine. Just like Vera, it was a small mix-up of words that led to a huge tragedy. Her boyfriend watched it all happen right before his eyes. He couldn't believe what she'd done. He ran to the side of the bridge and jumped down to rush to her side. But in his hurry, he got injured scrambling down the steep ravine. But that didn't matter. Only Yecenia did. He tried calling her name and giving her CPR. But what he didn't realize was that Yecenia was already gone. It was too late. The first responders were firefighters. After seeing that Yecenia was gone, they gave first aid to her boyfriend. But they couldn't treat his broken heart as he watched the love of his life being carried away back to the hospital. But at the hospital, that's where they found out the true cause of her death. Instead of dying from the impact, Yecenia must have realized on the way down that she had no cord. And in her panic, she had a heart attack and died. Isn't that sad? I don't know if anyone was at fault here, and the courts agreed. It was a single miscommunication, but it was enough to cost a young woman her life. The decision to jump alone can be scary, which is why Celine de Souter found an incredible solution. She didn't have to jump alone. Celine's partner, Guillaume, agreed to jump with her. They could do it together, and they didn't even have to go far. Just 20 miles from their home in the small town of Audingthun, France, one bungee company was offering tandem jumps for 2 people at the same time. Now Celine could make the ultimate leap, and she could do it with the man she loved. It was the perfect solution to her problem. She could conquer the fear and make memories that would bring the two of them together. She could even have a story to tell her 6-month-old son when he grew up. A story about his wild mother and her leap of love. At least, that was the hope. On Sunday, June 28, 2015, Celine and Guillaume drove the 45 minutes to the bungee site. It was a tall crane set up beside a quarry, and when they arrived, the couple could see that there were quite a few people there already. It was a popular destination for the thrill junkies. As the website claimed, over 11,000 people had already bungeed from this very spot in the last 2 years. As Celine got out of the car, she looked all the way up the crane. And there, 213 feet in the air, you could barely make out the figures at the peak. As the couple signed waivers and paid their fees, they watched as single and tandem jumpers bungeed off the crane's basket. Would that excite you? Or terrify you? Celine was pumped. Her first jump looked like it was going to be a blast, but she didn't know her first jump would be her last. Guillaume and Celine got their harnesses on as the safety instructors checked and rechecked the elastic cord. There was fraying, but no obvious signs of wear. Everything looked like the jump was going to be exactly like the rest. The system was designed so that the bungee jumpers free fall in the air for 164 feet before the cord pulls them up. That last 49 feet before the ground was enough space for the stretch of the elastic, letting the jumpers bounce up and down in the air safely. And so, with everything finally clicked in and checked off, Guillaume and Celine got in the basket and started to climb. The sun was still high in the sky at 6 p.m., so the pair got an incredible view of the French countryside for miles around. It was peaceful and warm. It was the perfect night for a bungee jump. At the top, the bungee team gave the couple a moment to enjoy the view. If you were up there, how tempted would you be to look down? I'm sure Celine tried her best not to think of the height and simply to enjoy the moment. When they were finally ready, Celine and Guillaume looked in each other's eyes, counted down, and jumped off. The first couple of seconds were a pure rush, all the emotions packed into one moment. But the next moment, all those emotions disappeared as the bungee didn't pull up. Fear took over. The team and the crowd standing by watched in horror as the bungee stayed limp while the tandem team fell. And without anything to slow their fall, Guillaume and Celine hit the ground at almost 80 miles an hour. Celine, unfortunately, died instantly from the fall. Guillaume was only slightly luckier, if you can call it that. He was miraculously still alive, but with life-threatening injuries. Someone called for an ambulance and medics arrived very quickly to try and help him. They confirmed that Celine had died before rushing Guillaume off to the hospital in Lille, 50 miles away. The police got involved right away to find out what had happened. Was it a crime or simply a mistake? The authorities seized all the equipment, including the crane, to see if it was an actual fault in the equipment or if someone had made a fatal mistake. After their investigation, the police arrested both the general manager and the 21-year-old working the crane that day. They were both charged with involuntary manslaughter because of a single safety latch that wasn't closed properly before the couple jumped. Celine's fall was an accident, but what if the fall feels like fate? A lot of these stories are about people trying bungee jumping one time and dying. But this story seems especially tragic because it was her second jump that ended her life. Kleyo de Abreu was someone who lived her life as fully as possible. She was fearless about everything. When she wanted to study fashion and design, she didn't hesitate to move from Cape Town, South Africa, to London, England. And when she went to visit her aunt in Langeron, Spain, she immediately looked for the closest adventure, which happened to be a popular bungee jumping spot right near her, just 5 miles away, in fact. It was too good to pass up. The Tablate Bridge is a unique piece of architecture. The modern bridge is actually built over a much older bridge. Why didn't they just take down the old bridge when putting up the new one? Because the first bridge is at least 2,000 years old, first built by the Romans. And somehow, thousands of years later, the Roman bridge still stands today. But that's not where people jump from. The adventure seekers head to the newer, higher bridge. From the edge, looking down the ravine 295 feet below, you can see why thousands of adventurers love jumping from this very spot. Those who've done it say that the rush you feel with the narrow ravine on each side is unreal. Plus, how often can you say you've bungeed next to actual Roman history? Without a second thought, Kleyo signed up to take the jump. For the equivalent of around $51, she chose one of the several adventure tour companies that offered bungee packages. And on July 21, 2015, she and her aunt drove 8 minutes over to the bridge. 14 others joined Kleyo that day. Was that more than usual? It's hard to say, but there was only one guy in charge of the bungee jump. The single supervisor gave everyone the standard safety briefing and made sure everyone knew what to expect for their jumps. Just like Kleyo, many of them were there for the first time. After a few jumps, it was Kleyo's turn. She got into her harness as the supervisor brought her to the edge. The nerves she felt were a new feeling, but she was already hooked. She knew she was going to love it. She shakily stood on the edge, waiting for her supervisor to give the okay. And when he did, Kleyo did not hesitate. She jumped. She screamed in delight as she fell 65 feet from the bridge, watching the rushing ravine blow past her. And then, just as she thought it was too late, the bungee snapped tight and pulled her back from her dive. With the biggest smile on her face, she already knew what she wanted. She wanted to do that again. Back up on the bridge, Kleyo tried to tell her aunt about the feeling of falling. There were no words to describe it. After some time, Kleyo's second jump was ready. Again, she stepped up to the edge of the railing. Again, she looked down into the ravine. Only this time, she knew what to expect. She jumped. But something was wrong. Kleyo did not wait for the signal from the overworked supervisor. He hadn't given her the okay because everything was not okay. Her ropes were too long. As Kleyo fell, she didn't stop short of the Roman bridge below. Instead, Kleyo screamed as she swung at full force into the bridge with no way to escape. And in full sight of everyone there that day, including her aunt, Kleyo's body slammed into the wall of age-old bricks. Her screaming stopped. Emergency services showed up just minutes later. They found Kleyo still dangling limply from the ropes. But as they cut her down, there was nothing that they could do. She had died from the impact. Kleyo died trying to do something historical, and so did Laura. At 43, Laura Patterson had spent her whole life in the air. Her parents were circus performers, and she grew up just like them, flying on trapezes, walking tightropes, making the impossible look effortless. She was fearless and a natural, and she even married a fellow performer. So when the organizers of Super Bowl 31 wanted a jaw-dropping stunt to end their halftime show, they called her Team. A 16-person bungee performance, something wild, something unforgettable. There was just one little twist. Laura had never bungee jumped before, but as a circus performer, she would add one more thing to her skill set to be part of this historical moment in sports. Laura, her husband, her sister, and 13 others agreed to perform, and they put together an act perfect for both TV and a live audience. The week leading up to the show, the team worked hard to perfect their routines. Hours and hours of getting the timing right with the music, and coordinating over a dozen people on bungee cords. And so, on Thursday night, January 23rd, everyone was tired but excited. After working in circuses for years, Laura was used to putting on a show for crowds, but this was the biggest performance of her life. She must have felt just a little nervous, wouldn't you? Inside the stadium, everyone buzzed with energy. Hundreds of people, musicians, dancers, tech crews, even kids, watched as the performers rehearsed. Up in the rafters, 100 feet above the ground, Laura stood on her tiny platform. She checked her clip, gave the cord a tug, and yanked on her harness. She was also wearing headgear, but it wasn't immediately clear whether it was part of her costume or a helmet. All good. Then, she took a deep breath and jumped. Her first bounce was perfect. The bungee stretched and snapped her back up like it was supposed to. Her second bounce was smooth. Everything still felt right. But on her third drop, something went wrong. Laura didn't bounce back like she was supposed to. She just fell, and she hit the ground hard. Her body bounced back like a rag doll, but she wasn't moving. Her husband and sister screamed and rushed over to her. The medics also arrived, trying to bring her back. They removed her headgear, and that's when they saw the damage. The third fall, which was supposed to be her last of the night, ended up being the last of her life. Laura had died on impact. In showbiz, they say the show must go on. The Super Bowl organizers quietly cut the bungee act from the show. But Laura was more than a show. She was a person with passion. On Sunday night, the Patriots and the Packers paused their game for the muted halftime show. Everyone performing wore a white ribbon in memory of Laura. It was a small gesture and a powerful one. It was a way for the whole crowd to say, "Laura, we remember you." It wasn't just a show, it was a final goodbye. In each of these stories, brave women risked everything to feel alive. And yes, their stories remind us that life is fragile. But I believe they don't just tell us to live boldly. They show us how it's done. Want to support the channel? Join for exclusive perks. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Stay bold and live brave.